Deborah was a public leader. Jael was a private warrior. Deborah prophesied, Jael acted. Deborah led Israel. Jael killed the enemy commander in a tent. Same story, same victory, but two completely different expressions of authority. And here's what we need to understand. You've been trying to operate in someone else's calling while abandoning your own, because you think authority only looks one way. But Deborah and Jael are about to blow that up. Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. I hope you guys had a great Valentine's Day. I did. We had an amazing evening. My husband took me shopping. Then we went for this great dinner. And then he gave me the flu. I have been so sick and I'm better now. However, I don't sound better. So, I sound a little raspy and nasally, but I'm feeling better. But also, if today's video is a little more choppier than normal, it's because I'm having to stop and cough my head off and then get back to it. But before we get started, I want to remind you that if you go look in the description box down below, you will be able to download the Bible study workbook that goes along with this Deborah series. So make sure you go check that out. Don't want to miss out on that. So now let's first look at how we have two different women with the same victory. Deborah's authority was a very public one. She was a judge. She was a prophetess. She led the nation of Israel. She spoke God's words openly. She held court, made decisions, and led that nation. She was a very visible persona. She had a very public appearance, but she was also very verbal, and she had a very recognized role. Her sphere of influence was a very national leadership and prophetic voice. Now, Jael's authority was very private. She stayed in her home, her tent. She was behind the scenes. She acted decisively in the moment. There was no announcement, no proclamation, or permission asking even. There was no witnesses initially. She was a very hidden character until she was revealed. It was very strategic, and she was a very bold woman. Her sphere of influence was contained into private courage, but immediate action. Through Jael's actions, the prophecy that Deborah had shared with Barak was fulfilled. See, Deborah told Barak that the honor would go to a woman. And when you're first reading this story, you may think that, it's going to go to Deborah. Well, because Deborah's going with Barak, but it doesn't. It actually goes to a hidden character, a hidden figure of Jael. Jael fulfilled Deborah's prophecy. And both of them, both Deborah and Jael, were operating in their full authority. Neither one of them were competing with each other, and they were both very celebrated. They had different expressions of authority, but it came from the same source. What's amazing about this is that it reveals to us that authority isn't limited to just public platforms, and power isn't only found in recognized positions. See, your sphere of influence is your sphere, and trying to operate in someone else's calling, it actually undermines your own. And so many times we see people who they crave a title or position because they feel like if they get that title or position, then they have authority, then they have power. When reality is you have authority and power all within yourself. And you have the ability to influence those around you. You already have authority, power, and influence. You look around and see what your sphere of influence is, and that is your sphere. You don't have to have a title or a position. You already are operating in authority and position through influence. See, Deborah didn't need to be Jael, and Jael didn't need to be Deborah. Neither needed to be the other, and neither do you. Which brings me to my next point of that we can often get into this comparison trap. When you start comparing your calling, it can often look like thoughts of, well, I should be more public like her, or I should be more behind the scenes like her, or, well, my sphere is not as important as hers. And you end up measuring your authority against someone else's expression. And sometimes that leads us to actually abandoning our sphere of influence. When we try to operate in places where we're not called to be, we start neglecting where we are called. Sometimes we may try to mimic by performing someone else's gifting, thinking that's where it's at. We can even end up envying someone else's platform while abandoning our own. Then we start competing instead of complimenting. We may start seeing other women, their authority as a threat to our own. Sometimes we'll even see their success. Like that's a threat. They're competition. I'm in competition with them. And they become a threat to us instead of a partner. When we feel threatened by someone else's authority, we have a tendency to want to diminish them in order to elevate ourselves. On the flip side, you may even start diminishing yourself in order to not outshine someone else. Either way, all these things come back down to this sense of like who I am and what I've been called to do, my level of authority, my sphere of influence is not good enough. It's not enough. It's not like someone else's, so therefore it must be less than. And all of that is rooted in an orphan spirit. It's not rooted in sonship. It's not rooted in a daughter of the king mentality. It's always, always, always about identity. And whenever we have misplaced identity about who we are and our value and worth and authority that we carry and the sphere of influence that we already possess, when we don't know who that is and we think it should be like somebody else's, and then when it's not, there's this contention, and it stems from a false belief of I'm not good enough. That mentality leads us to thinking, well, I must perform the right kind of authority. We start critiquing ourselves, thinking, well, maybe I should be louder or quieter, or I need to be more visible, or I need to be more humble. Well, I need to fit the mold of what authority actually looks like. We abandon our design in order for what we think is an acceptable version. But when you understand your identity and you're operating from a daughterhood authority, it looks very different. You're able to operate in your sphere of influence with full authority. You can celebrate others in their sphere without feeling a need to compare. There's trust that different expressions actually serve different purposes. And ultimately, we just stop performing for someone else's calling. How many times have you seen the lady in the church who just prays so eloquently or just fervently, or someone who sings, or even someone who teaches? Like, you see someone else operating in their authority, their gifting, their talent, whatever, and you feel like I should be like that. I need to be more like that. And we have this tendency to put other people up on this pedestal, thinking that they're more holy or they're more spiritual than we are. And we diminish, like, okay, I'm not good enough because I don't look like that. And that's what leads us down this crazy thought process of all the things I went through. And it's all rooted in an orphan spirit and a lack of understanding the value and worth and authority that you already carry through your identity as a child of God. You see, your authority isn't less because it looks different. In Jael's private tent, it was just as powerful as Deborah's palm tree. See, the enemy died either way. So we need to stop comparing our expressions of authority and start operating in what is rightfully ours. Now, that brings me to my next point, needing the importance of identifying your sphere of authority. So let me ask you a question. Where do you naturally operate? Is it public or private? Is it verbal or is it more action-oriented? Are you leading or are you supporting? Are you more visible or are you more of a behind-the-scenes kind of person? What keeps showing up in your life? For instance, what do people continually ask you for? Where do opportunities seem to just keep presenting themselves? What breaks your heart or fires you up? What do you get passionate about? And where do you feel like your authority is more natural versus being performed? Where are you trying to force it? For instance, what are you doing just simply because you should do it? Where, if any, are you performing someone else's calling, where you're trying to be like someone else? And what platform are you chasing that probably isn't yours? Where does your authority feel like you're striving to make it work? If you're unsure, let me give you a quick litmus test. You see, Deborah didn't wake up trying to be Jael, and Jael didn't resent Deborah's platform. They both operated in their sphere of authority with full authority. So where are you abandoning your tent in order to chase someone else's palm tree? 1 Corinthians 12 tells us that there are different gifts, but they all come from the same spirit. Romans 12 talks about the different functions, but it's all of one body. And Matthew 25 mentions that we have different talents, but the same accountability. So we're not judged by someone else's stewardship. only our own. Now let's talk about the public versus private, how both of them are authoritative roles. So often we think, well, I'm not in any kind of position of authority because I'm not on stage, I don't have a microphone, I don't have, I'm not leading a group of people, I'm not leading whatever. You do have authority. You have a sphere of influence wherever you are and whatever you're doing. You may not be the one on stage with the microphone, but it doesn't mean that you lack any level of authority. Yours just looks different. Let's look at Deborah. See, Deborah had a very public authority. She didn't apologize for its visibility. She didn't shrink in order to make others more comfortable. She didn't perform humility by hiding. And she operated openly without any kind of permission seeking. And comparatively, let's look at Jael's authority, which was more of a private position of authority. See, she didn't despise her behind the scenes sphere. She didn't chase platforms that weren't hers. And she didn't diminish her impact just because it wasn't visible. She operated powerfully right where she was. Now, if you're called to private or public authority, both of those lists I just went through apply to you as well. What about if you're called to both private and public? There may be different seasons and different expressions, but don't force consistency, because where God designed variety, learn to ebb and flow with the seasons. Operate where you're called now. I've not always been on a stage, on a platform, or with a microphone. There's been many, many years where I operated behind the scenes. And there are still roles in my life that I still operate behind the scenes. And I don't despise those things. I actually enjoy them. I enjoy the public one too, to a degree, because I know it's where God wants me to be. I always find that I enjoy where God wants me to be. If we've moved around and lived in different places, and every time we move somewhere, I feel like, oh, this could be home. Like I could see just really planting roots here and staying here the rest of my life. And the whole reason I felt that way is because it's where God wanted me to be at that time. I was operating in His will and following the Spirit. And therefore there was peace around it. And so of course you just want to snuggle in and anchor in and dig down deep there. It's the same thing with your operating in your authority of your position. Wherever you are now, don't despise it and operate in it. There will be times where you're going to be put out in the public and have a very visible role of authority. And then there are going to be times where your authority is going to be very private. Just trust when the shifts come. And the hard truth is the enemy doesn't care if you kill him in a tent or under a palm tree. He just wants you to be too busy complaining, comparing, competing, and performing to actually operate in your authority. So stop asking, well, am I Deborah or Jael? And start asking, where am I called to operate today? So let me give you a quick exercise to help flesh this out. Fill in the blank here. My natural sphere of influence is it public, private, or a hybrid of both? I feel most alive when is it speaking, acting, creating, leading, or supporting? Or maybe it's something else. You fill in the blank. I'm currently abandoning my sphere by chasing, hiding, comparing, or performing. And then if I operated in my authority, my sphere of influence, instead of comparing, I would fill in the blank. So this week, I want you to take inventory. Look and see if there's one way that you're either chasing someone else's sphere or you're hiding from your own. And then just do one thing different. One thing this week that operates in your actual authority, not what you think it should look like or not compared to somebody else's, but what it actually is. In our next episode, we're going to talk about how Deborah celebrated herself. Hey, if you're getting value out of this content, would you do me a favor and hit the subscribe button, like the video, and even share it with a friend? It really helps. Thank you. Jael drove a pent tag through Sisera's head. She's my kind of girl.